Mayim, I'm so excited to welcome you to this interview that we're conducting. It's sort of a special thing. We've made YouTube videos together and you've written for our site, but this is sort of our first time to kind of sit down and talk a little about your book that you wrote earlier this year, Girling Up, and a little bit about what inspired you to do it, your own Jewish journey, I think the Jewish values that you've infused into the book. And I really love how you got, kind of these nuggets to just a wide audience where they probably wouldn't have otherwise gotten there. So
Thank you for
I guess,
having me.
oh yeah, and you're welcome. And just like for anyone, I mean, I guess it's so you kind of don't need introduction because I think everyone only knows me because of you. But I'm
So a lot of
aware.
people know me because of you, which is really cool.
I'm self-aware, but just for anyone that has been living under a rock for Emmy nominations, the star of First Beaches, the first movie that I cried at, and then Blossom, and now Big Bang Theory. A few books you've written along the way, got a PhD in neuroscience, mother of two, just kind of the general, wrap up
I
of
have a
how.
website. I make YouTube
Oh, that's true,
videos.
right? Grok Nation, right? You
Yes,
grok with people,
I do
right?
talk with people.
So yeah, I'm so like excited to kind of just have this chance to sit down and talk to you, because this is an exciting project. So I guess I want to talk to you first, and I love like the cover here, like we're going to show it here.
Oh,
Like here you're kind of like
woo!
super funny, and love from and fabulous always. But you pull the two together, because I feel like sort of the superhero look that we have for women usually is like everything sticking out.
Right,
So a little more discreet there.
right. It's
So,
more of it's like a mom superhero because I am a mom.
okay, fine.
Yeah.
So what does girling up mean? Why did you write it?
I wrote Girling Up largely because there wasn't such a book when I was making that transition from being a girl to being a woman. That's a process that takes, um, you know, it takes an amount of time and transitional concept, meaning it's not like you wake up one day and you're a woman as opposed to a girl. So I wanted to really convey that with this notion of the title of Growing Up, that this is a process, it's a verb. And, the stages that we go through as females can take many years, and there are a lot of physiological things that happen, and there are a lot of hormonal things that happen, and there are a lot of psychological things that happen. And with my training in neuroscience, I was really interested in writing about kind of my experience as an unusual female, which I was as a child, I am as an adult, and also kind of using my neuroscience background to talk about the science of that process by which we go from girl to woman. And I should mention that I actually wrote a companion book, Boying Up, which will come out next spring of 2018. And even though I'm not a boy, I am a scientist. And so I wrote basically a similar book about the physiology and the anatomy and the hormonal shifts that are involved with going from being a boy and becoming a man. And obviously, we also include a lot of voices from real men and the voices of my children, who are both boys. So yeah, it's an interest of mine as a scientist and as a mom, and I guess just as a human being, to explore this process and also present it in a way that's not political or that's not overtly religious, like this is the way you should be, but really understanding kind of the biology behind our behavior, and then making choices that work for you and your family as you become an adult.
So yeah, so the book, has the pictures of sort of the coming of age, so people know their parts. So that's sort of like I'm saying, people should be aware that this is, sort of, if you are looking to, give a girl that's going through that stage of development a way to learn more about that. It could be a sit
Sure.
down. However you do that in your family. We had some cartoon pictures when we were growing up.
Right. And that's what
So
this book has. This book has, kind of fun illustrations, but yes, there are pictures of anatomy. That's a thing. But also there's a bit about boy anatomy, just enough so that we understand what body parts are and what we're talking about. And the same goes for Boying Up. I included enough about girls and about breasts and about, the things that happen to bodies, because I feel like a lot of it is things that we don't talk about. And I don't tell people what they should talk about, but I feel like this is a really good resource for younger kids, for their parents to work through it with them and decide what works for them to read to their kids.
So, like reading through this, the tone is definitely not preachy. It's very much, you clearly have things that work for you and ways that you live your life by, but you're careful. And I think you really understand your audience that, just your average American girl is not coming from sort of a traditional Jewish take that you're coming at it.
Right.
Um, but I think that I think it still is sort of an opportunity that you're using, this platform that you have to put some of these ideas out there, at least as possibilities. When, I would say, you know, back in the 60s, the counterculture,
Sorry.
cat appearing in the screen. The counterculture was kind of the breaking the rules. And I would say today's counterculture is sort of a return to tradition or to, I don't know, a certain type of, because I feel like society now sort of counterculture became normal, and I think your voice is the counterculture in a way. So what are your thoughts in terms of using your platform as a way to disseminate maybe more traditional or modest choices as a possibility?
Well, I mean, I appreciate that you bring that up because it was a consideration, when I wrote this book, that the reason that I actually had the courage to write it is I had written an article for my website, for groknation.com, about the first episode that shows Amy and Sheldon, the character that I play, and my long-term boyfriend on the show. I wrote a piece about what it was like to show them being intimate for the first time, or to have an episode that focused on that. And it was something that, as a modest person, I felt kind of uncomfortable about, because it's a very personal thing. And I feel very protective over my character and for the, kind of autonomy that she has had as a woman who was in a romantic but non-sexual relationship. And so I wrote an article about kind of being a late bloomer and then playing one on TV. And Jill Santopolo, who ended up being the editor for Growing Up, reached out to me and said, I love how you talked about being a late bloomer and being a modest person, not from a preachy or religious perspective. Would you be interested in sharing this kind of voice? And I sort of said to her, well, how about if I do that not just about dating and relationships? What if I do it about the entire experience of being female, as kind of being a late bloomer and someone kind of on the outside who didn't understand all the jokes that other kids were making and wasn't allowed to see all the movies that were R-rated and things like that. And so I'm grateful to her that she let me kind of run with that. So that was sort of the framework for the book, was how to present, an alternative perspective that's also legitimate. Meaning not everyone is doing what we see a lot of kids doing on TV or in movies. That wasn't my experience as a teenager. Even as an adult, I never watched those like American Pie movies. Like, it just doesn't appeal to me. I don't really like movies like that. It doesn't depict my life, and I don't find it entertaining. So that's what I wanted to do in Girling Up, and it's what I also do in Boying Up, is saying that these things exist. Here are the reasons why traditional dating is a good thing. Here's why, exclusively online dating might be something you should put a red flag about. And I think in particular, that was a very difficult chapter to write, was on, love and dating and relationships, because you don't want to just come out and say, like, don't be intimate before you get married. That's the solution to everything, because that's not going to speak to a lot of kids' experience and a lot of girls' experience or boys' experience. But what I did is I sort of presented why traditional values are helpful, meaning the notion of courtship, which is kind of all but gone in secular dating. It serves a purpose, and here are the positive things about courtship, and here are the negative things, that can come from, kind of buying into this notion that a guy needs to ask your father, if you can go on a date, and has to do that whole thing. But there are positives to that too, and to that notion of trust. And that's a really important part of any relationship, even if it's not a romantic one. What do you look for in a friend? What are modest qualities that are important? Meaning, how do we conduct ourselves? How do we behave with our friends? And how do we behave on the internet? So those are things that needed to be included in this book, because that's the world that we live in. But I didn't want it to be judgmental. And I didn't want it also to exclude my experience, which is one of, kind of being more of a traditional person.
What kind of feedback has the book gotten so far? Have you gotten to hear from any of the girls that girled up by reading it?
When I did the book tour for Girling Up, I got to interact with a lot of different kinds of people who were reading the book. And that was really gratifying for me. Obviously it's a thing that you want to make the New York Times bestseller list, but I had no idea that we were going to. But once I started seeing,
five and a half weeks in New York
Yes,
Times
right.
Bestseller.
I have it framed. Like the publisher sends you like a picture of the framed time that you reach that milestone. But I was hearing from a lot of people who knew me as Blossom, and I was hearing from a lot of people who knew me from The Big Bang Theory, and there were a lot of traditional Jews and traditional Christians and religious people who really kind of liked how the book was presented, but a lot of secular people and, people from all walks of life and all gender identities. And that was really cool to me because I wanted to write a book that appealed to a lot of people because it's grounded in science and it's grounded in my personal experience, which doesn't have to be everyone's experience. But my goal was really to reach a lot of people. And it seems like I was able to do that, which makes me really happy because I think that we, especially girls, are missing a lot of basic information about not only our bodies, but our rights as women and our rights to assert our control over our bodies in positive ways. So that's really what I was hoping, I think, to get across.
So I was just interviewed today on 770 WABC before I'm coming here to interview you. And one of the questions they asked me, because they had done a segment apparently the day before bashing Orthodox Jews and Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
So I was come in to, show them the other
to save
side.
The day.
Exactly. And I know I'm going to get my super cape out too, my Superwoman cape out too. And one of the questions they, said to me was, why do Orthodox Jews make women cover up? And I said, I'm going to turn that on you. And I'm going to say, why does the secular world make us take our clothes off? Because, if you think about it, really the messaging that we're getting from the fashion industry and from media, every example we see of beautiful girls and, girls our age is to be showing off. And, and I wrote about on Graph Nation, the skin gap, which talk
Right.
about discrepancy between how much skin men and women are expected to show in the same
Right.
social setting. And I didn't actually have that autonomy over what I was supposed to show. I just, people, I think, like to always talk about how Orthodox Judaism controls women and forces them to cover up. And what I need to acknowledge is that I think there are certain communities where women do feel more of that pressure and don't feel autonomous to dress
Sure.
as they want to. And wherever that's happening, that's a problem and that's not how it's supposed to be. But I think that we don't recognize how much control media and fashion has over, and I think that's one of the things you speak about in the book a little bit, how much media controls sort of how we see the world. I don't know if
Right.
that's something to touch on a little bit about sort of how
Yeah.
media depictions make us see.
Well, I think that was also, one of the goals of this book was to present a wider perspective so that we don't just assume things or that we don't just assume that everybody's doing it and we should too. Even the notion when I was a kid that things that I saw in the media weren't real was very surprising to me. When I got to be a teenager and started being more critical and more skeptical about media, I realized, oh, this isn't everybody's experience. And I really gravitate towards filmmakers and in particular towards actresses and female role models who model the kind of life that I want to have, And I think that was something I really wanted to convey in Girling Up was that there are a lot of choices we can make. And there are some people who believe that the feminist choice is to make whatever choice you want. That's not necessarily my personal perspective, but I also think that just the notion of you're okay how you are, and if you're not comfortable wearing something that's very revealing, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And yes, it means that you're not going to identify with a lot of what you see in the media. And that's my experience, that's my kids' experience. When we look at billboards and I wonder if they wonder, why doesn't mama dress like that? If everybody's doing it or that's what the media is presenting, is that the only normal way to be? And I think it's important the earlier we can teach girls that you get to be in control of what you wear. And I mentioned Wendy Shalit, her book, Return to Modesty, which is, I think really having a resurgence. And I think the notion that it's not a religious idea to not want to show parts of you that don't make you feel comfortable. And there are more and more girls who are speaking up, asking for more clothing options. And, I really see, and you and I, this isn't the only time we talk is when we, sit in front of a camera. But you and I share a lot, like throughout the year about how the fashion industry has been, kind of shifting. And whereas I would fetch to you, like, I can't find a dress for the Emmys that's not showing all parts of me. Now there are actually designers specifically catering towards modest fashion. And there are all these amazing modern Orthodox bloggers and fashion people who are being featured in the New York Times. And it's really awesome. Like the world of modest fashion is really picking up, not as a religious statement, which obviously for us, it has value that way, but it's picking up for a lot of people who just also want options, because you don't want to wear the same dress every single time you go to an awards show anyway. So for me, I'm always looking for things that cover, like to the elbow and not too plunging and not too high, and like name a dimension of me, and there's rules about it. But again, that's a personal choice I make so that I feel more comfortable. And I think that's something that people find really surprising, and that you and I, have talked about, written about. We live this life of I actually feel better about myself when I know that I'm not worried about being compared to other people, or I'm not comparing myself to other people. I like to feel comfortable, especially when I'm on a carpet, which I'm a socially anxious person. That's not a comfortable place for me. If I'm feeling like I need to be tucking in, comparing, wearing body makeup in places that the sun normally doesn't shine, and that's why those places are white, that doesn't make me feel my best. So I really like to know I feel dignified. I feel good in what I'm wearing. I feel attractive in a way that's appropriate for my life. And if you feel attractive in a see-through outfit with your underwear showing, that's fine. It doesn't have to be that there's something wrong with me because I don't want that.
Okay, to open that possibility, as you're saying that, and I think the New York Times wrote recently that I don't know what to call the decade, the 2010s, because I don't think we actually named it. I feel like it's right, the 10s, like we didn't really name it, but I think they wrote that like sort of the trend of the 2010s was modesty. And I wonder if that sort of the media or the fashion industry having that trend, does that now start to trickle down into what girls and women see for themselves in terms of beautiful or as possibilities?
Yeah, I remember, I think it was last season. I don't really pay attention to the seasons, but I do think that it was last season that like T-length skirts came into fashion, like past the knee, full, really cute, kind of almost 50s style. And it's stuff that you and I have been cultivating for years, and so many women in modest circles have been doing. But also there was a couple years ago where like bold colored tights were in. And I was thinking, thank goodness, like I have so many bold colored tights that I wear with skirts that like, past the knee. So I think it's really great because also when you would send me dress ideas, like over the years that I've been nominated, much as I love Helen Mirren's style, I think I kept telling you, like, Helen Mirren's a grandma. Don't send me pictures of her. But now you've been sending me pictures, and it's like, it's people that you and I admire as actresses who are our age, or who are closer to our age. Like, that's really cool. And that's something I can take to a stylist and say, I'm not telling you to make me look like a grandma. I'm telling you to make me look like all these cool actresses who are on shows that I don't always watch, but I know that they're hip because Allison sent me to them.
Watch TV. Another point of the book that I like that you mentioned, because I feel like modesty comes up a ton. Mm-hmm. I feel like you sort of bring a little bit of highlighting and some neuroscience behind guarding of the eyes, shomer, and that's something that I don't think we talk about enough in our pornified society. It's something I worry so much about. What my kids are seeing, just what the world is becoming when like these are our, like, I mean, the fact that like, with the rise of ubiquitous porn that like girls are even having surgery down there now to try, like, it just seems like so many expectations are off and so much violence. And so let's talk about the neuroscience behind what we see.
The neuroscience behind the end of modern culture as we know it. I think there's going to be varying kind of opinions about this. I think that one of the things that we can say that is scientifically accurate is that the more we see something, the more we get used to it. And that can be a really good thing. The more we experience, the physical sensation of clothing on our skin, the less we think, gosh, I'm wearing clothes, right? It's actually, your body's constantly perceiving that you are wearing clothing all day, but the brain has to find a way to filter out those receptors that are saying you're wearing clothing so that we can deal with all the other things we have to deal with, like my cat coming up to me while I'm trying to talk to you.
You have a cat coming on your neck.
There's like always cats. So I think that, for me, what I find, really significant is that, there can be a sense of empowerment and comfort in knowing that there are certain parts of you that are only saved for certain situations. So I don't wear pants outside of the house. I wear pants in the house. And I don't think that, sweatpants are a statement on my sexuality. But I think that for me, it's a real distinction, between the person that I am outside of the house and the person that I am in the house. And, for me, bathing suits that provide more coverage makes me feel different than when I'm in my underwear, And when I've worn bikinis in my life, and I'm sure you remember this from your bikini days, it's really the only thing different about it is the context, right? But that's underwear, And so for me, I like underwear to be underwear. So I like to find different options for me when I'm in a bathing suit so that I'm not feeling like I'm sitting in my underwear. For some women, it's totally not an issue. More power to them. If they feel comfortable and they feel great, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. I know for me, I feel icky and weird if I virtually feel like I'm in a bra and underwear while trying to interact with people. And I know that, especially when I'm talking to people of the opposite sex or people of the same sex who might be, interested in all sorts of people, I know that people's attention is different when I'm virtually in an underwear bra set. My attention's different when other people are virtually in an underwear and bra set. And that's human. It's normal. To me, that doesn't mean that I'm afraid of sexuality. It means that for me, I like to have it be in the places that I choose. And poolside is not one of them.
Love it. Totally. What about, and we're actually sort of coming to the end here now, just got a few minutes left, but it's been lovely chatting with you.
Always.
You talk about, you have a section on in the book about coping. And one of the things you talk about, well, one thing is sort of the congregation going to a house of worship, and then you also speak about prayer. So I'm not sure if you've spoken, about this, in any interviews before about sort of what this in your life. Yeah.
When people ask me what's the hardest chapter that you wrote in Growing Up, I automatically say the love and dating and sex chapter. And it's actually the chapter I wrote first because I was so scared about it. I wanted to make sure that if my editor hated the way I was talking or if I sounded too guarded, that she would tell me right off the bat. But the most personal chapter is the chapter on coping. And usually what people want to talk about with the coping chapter is that, I talk about my experience with anxiety, with depression, with social anxiety, with OCD. I talk a lot about the things that I do to cope. And many of them are things that are scientifically proven to work. Ancient traditions have known about them for thousands of years. So I talk about simple and easy ways to, lower your blood pressure with meditation, with breathing. But yeah, no one has ever specifically asked me, you would be the first, about the inevitable emphasis that I needed to put on the reason that for thousands of years, people have come together in communities and in groups for life cycle events, but also to get through difficult things. And it gives me chills now because I've experienced this in other religious traditions as well. The father of my children is a convert, and I have been in his family. He comes from a Mormon family, and I've seen the power of community at funerals, in other times of difficulty. This is not something exclusive to the Jewish faith, but it's something that I do speak about from the Jewish experience and also broaden it out. There are reasons that people come together. And there are reasons that, for example, when my father passed away, bless his memory, we are encouraged to pray with a group of people. We encouraged to commemorate things by forcing ourselves to be around people because it is important. And scientifically, we know that coping and healing does happen well when people are in groups. That doesn't mean there's not room for being by yourself and for quiet contemplation, but prayer serves a purpose. And we do know that it affects our physiology. We know that it affects how we view prognoses for diagnoses that are scary. Those things do matter. And even if, having a God relationship is not for you, a notion that there's something bigger than you that you can't explain or understand is very, very comfortable for me as a Jewish person. And a lot of people, I think, their health and their psychology would really benefit, from being open to that understanding that there are reasons people come together in organized religion. And there are a lot of creative ways to have a spiritual connection without that. But these have been in place for thousands of years for a reason.
And what about your journey in terms of observance? I'm saying you probably pray more now than you used to, growing up. Would that be a correct thing to say? Or in terms of your journey of faith, I saw not a a large focus on faith, but you do have a nice quote on faith from Martin Luther King Jr. in the book.
Right.
So is there anything, just to sort of close us up in the last couple of minutes, anything to say on sort of the, your journey of maybe becoming a more, faithful person, or what
Yeah.
that's
I mean,
commitment?
I know that you're asking a question that you know the answer to because you were, intimately a part of my first explorations into organized understanding of my religious faith. And we met through Partners in Torah very serendipitously in a really, really amazing way. And yeah, it wasn't just you. Like, I read a lot of your comments and a lot of the beautiful things people say that you bring them closer to an understanding of their religious identity or their relationship with God, which is so powerful. But what I feel that you and I were able to achieve was, deciding for yourself what works is really what you inspired me to do and what you do, with your life. That's what you dedicate your life to do. So, for me, there was a personal reckoning that I had to make. For me, it came from understanding and asking those difficult questions, which is what you allowed me to do. Because I think, I grew up where you didn't really ask questions. You did what you were told. And like, if it didn't work for you, it must be that religion's stupid. That's really like the way that I was raised. So for me, becoming empowered to know what it was that I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do, and then making choices that fit for my life was really how I think my life changed. And, when people are like, oh, why do you need to be religious? Because there was no other way in my life that I experienced a desire, a motivation, and the skills to actually try and make the world better on a daily basis. And I'm not saying that I achieve that every day, but I have a purpose in life now. Everything that I do reflects on that. What kind of mom am I? What kind of worker am I? What kind of actor am I? What kind of friend am I? What kind of boss am I? All of those things for me had never been guided by anything until I found this notion of a purpose in the universe and a personal relationship with something bigger than me and a God that makes me never feel alone. And there are a lot of times in my life when I feel really, really alone, which I think people would be surprised to hear. But I always feel like I will not be dropped on my tush. And I never had that safety before. And that's really comforting for me. And not everybody needs that. Not everybody wants it. But it's kind of like when people ask me, how do you do so many things? I do it because I wake up with like the heart of a lion to like serve the universe as best as I can. It sounds really cheesy and corny. And it's not an advertisement for Jew in the City or for Partners in Torah or for you. But that's truth. That's my truth. So I'm grateful to be living it. And I'm so grateful to be able to talk to you and that we've had a friendship that has withstood, so many changes in our lives, mostly my life. But so many changes in our lives. So yeah, super grateful to be talking to you.
That's so touching. I'm like,
oh, we're both going to cry at the same time.
First you made me cry in beaches and now in this interview. I think we're like about out of time now, but it was really so lovely to chat about
This
Growing
is awesome.
Up. You can get your copy, 5 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, for any girl in your life or woman.
Or any man who needs to better understand a daughter, girlfriend, wife, or friend.
Any human.
Any human.
Read Growing Up. And look out for Boying Up is the name of the book. Spring 2018.
Yep.
And seriously, Mayim, keep doing what you're doing. You're awesome.
Thank you. You too. I love you, Allison.
Thanks. So you too. Bye.
Bye.